Hi, welcome to this week's Mailbox and Blizzcon special. So I've only done a couple of videos at the point I'm recording this and put out there, look through comments. Quite a lot of comments, easily plenty to do this, and as it's BlizzCon weekend, why not? I've split it into two parts. One part is all to do with the next expansion, the Battle for Azeroth. The other part is all to do with the first part of the game, which is the Classic WoW Legacy Servers announcement. So split into the two parts there. I'll put timestamps down below, or a timestamp at least, for the Classic WoW servers, because I'm going to go straight into the next expansion stuff now. So this first one was about the changes to World PvP. As Ian Hazakostas himself said, and I'm one of these people, you have people who are on PvP realms not because they want to do World PvP, which doesn't even exist anyway. He didn't say that, that's me adding it on. Because they want to play with friends or a particular guild. They don't want to engage in that World PvP. They just don't have the choice. Now, I've talked about this plenty of times before, and every time I mention it, people just say, why are you on a PvP realm? And I keep trying to explain, I don't know how it's a difficult concept, because I needed to join a guild. The guild is on a PvP realm. Almost all raiding guilds are on PvP realm. On the EU, there are two PvE realms. One Horde, one Alliance. That's it. Realistically speaking, in terms of ones that actually have raiding guilds on them. That might, in theory, be recruiting at a time when I'm looking. And neither of them were recruiting at a time when I was looking, because I would have actually put PvE realm, in terms of the top of my list of desirables when looking for a new guild, that would have been quite high on the list. So it's as simple as that. Now, do I enjoy this? No, I'll tell you about this morning, for example, really, really annoying. So I was out on Argus doing a world boss, and suddenly someone attacks me, and I see as my target a Horde Shaman coming up. I thought, oh, looking at them. And I looked at them, and they were just casting Healing Surge. I thought, okay. And they didn't do me very much damage. I thought, what's going on? I thought my champion was causing trouble, you know, Arathor. But no. Would I say Arathor? Arator. No, he wasn't. This thing actually was attacking me. He started attacking me again, a little tickling me. I thought, all right, I'll go and beat you up. At which point he started running away, and then a Horde warrior got involved, so I killed him. And then I spent 2 minutes, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, something like that, chasing this shaman around. You know, he ran away on his warframe. I jumped after him on my warframe. Then he came round, he slowed me again. Blessed of freedom on cooldown again. Eventually caught hold of him, because I weren't letting him get away. Eventually caught hold of him, killed him. I was like, it's just wasting both our time. And I get this constantly, and it's really annoying. And it's more annoying on my paladin than it is really detrimental on my alts, where my alts may actually die and then get rezzed up and then die again. And it's spoiling people's enjoyment. The people, you know, there's several people already put these comments, and they do every time I say this, you know, oh, it's spoiling my enjoyment. If I see someone of the opposite faction, I go over to them and I can't kill them. No, what you're wanting to do is spoil their enjoyment. They don't want to do the World PvP. You go and kill people who have opted into that system. That's how it should work. And sensible MMOs that have good PvP do that by creating totally separate PvE and PvP areas. Your questing areas, your PvE areas, and then you have a huge PvP zone. Now, the reason why probably a lot of World of Warcraft players think that that doesn't work is because of things like Ashran and Winterspring. But that's because they're rubbish. That's not what a PvP zone is. That's absolute rubbish. They're not even zones by PvE standards. So you can look at games like Dark Age of Camelot, Warhammer Online, which is not going anymore, and Elder Scrolls Online as the ideal way to do that. So yeah, I am totally delighted that this is coming in. I will definitely be opting in as a PvE player, and it is about time that this came in, and you know, thank goodness for it, because I agree with this comment here. You know, all World PvP is just people ganking. That's all it is. You see someone that you think is weaker than you. And as I've just described, most people don't even do that. They don't even look at this guy. Had no chance of killing me. Zero chance. When I got hold of them, they died in 3 hits. The warrior died in 2. That was baffling. But absolute nonsense. Next one. So this was the scaling. So I was talking about this. So I was doing my stream yesterday while Blizzard were talking about these things. Obviously, I wasn't actually streaming the BlizzCon. And, you know, it's quite tricky to be talking about it while they're also saying something else as well that I may miss. So I was talking about the fact that what I wanted, I'm glad the zone scaling is coming in, by the way. I'm totally glad of that. And I'm extra glad that it's coming in before the next expansion. But what I really wanted was full-on scaling, just full-on scaling. Now, they haven't gone for that. I sort of understand why they haven't gone for it. Anyway, whatever. Now, I know when I've talked about this before, some people have said they don't want full-on scaling as well, just like Blizzard haven't gone with. They want it along expansion lines. And I've got several of these comments. I was talking about the fact that it seems to be banded for the vanilla stuff. And people are saying, no, the vanilla zones all scale to 60. And they're linking a comment which Ian said about Westfall going from 10 to 60. So it sort of makes sense, like your Elwyn Forest presumably is 1 to 10. And then you can go to Westfall, 10 to 60. And people are reading into that everything that's not a starting zone is 10 to 60. But it's not. This is the clip I'm referring to.
If you are a brand new undead, you're a Forsaken starting off in Tirisfal Glades, we think it's important that when you look eastward towards the Plaguelands, there's a little bit of terror there. That's a scary, dangerous place. You're not strong enough to go there. And if you try, Welcome Bear will come out and hug you, and then you'll be back at your graveyard. And that's how it works. So we're thinking about a structure more like, imagine Westfall scales from 10 to 60, imagine Burning Steppe scales from 40 to 60.
So what you've got there is 2 zones that he specifically mentioned as not going from 10 to 60. And they won't be the only 2. So I don't know to what extent. I also don't know if people have been able to pin him down in an interview since. I've not had chance to go through all the interviews yet. And frankly, I won't be able to until those people produce text-based versions of most of them anyway. Because I've been busy doing videos. But yeah, it's quite clear that not all the vanilla ones will scale like that. Which is disappointing for me because, as I say, I wanted max scaling. So any limitations on it, and I understand the reasons, like, because I was wondering myself, okay, so let's say they did do full scaling as I'd want to, there would be an issue over dungeons and raids, and I was wondering, well, maybe they could do a scale version of the dungeons and raids, but those could be maybe capped instead of just the zones, or, you know, something like that. So the way they've gone about it is like this. So you can still go back and solo those old dungeons for Transmog and the old raids. It's just that when you go back and do, I don't know, like Dead Mine, say. Let's say Dead Mine scales to level 60 because that's in Westfall and that goes to 60. Then presumably as a level 110 or 20, whatever you're going to be at the time, you're going to get a piece of level 60 gear because the rewards scale as well. But it'll be the same gear for the Transmog, won't it? So that'll be all fine. That's okay. Next question. It says, are you sure the Warfronts are PvE? From what I could tell, it's kind of like old AV, where you gather resources, get your troops to be stronger, and they eventually go and kill the enemy commander. Yes, and it is weird, but I don't think it is like the old AV. People kept saying that. It's if you're going to link it to anything that's been in World of Warcraft, it sounds most similar to old AV, but I don't think that's what it is. The way they're billing it, now bear in mind, this is probably not going to be the last time I say this here, they always talk in very aspirational terms. In these BlizzCon, like BlizzCons go like in pairs. You have a BlizzCon where they announce the expansion, or maybe it's already been announced, but they're going over some of the initial details. And it's all very sketchy, and they're all talking about what they intend it to do and how it's going to work. But really what they're saying is how they want it to work. Not every system works the way they want it to work. It may surprise some people. And then in the other one, when it's about to launch, that's when they say more things. Except, of course, the new expansion may launch before the next BlizzCon. We don't know. But with Warfronts, they definitely said it, because they did the initial announcement, and they did a deep dive later on when they talked about a few of these things, and they described it as PvE. They specifically described it as PvE content. But here's the thing: there's two things I sort of want to say about that. The first of which is, yes, it is really weird that there wouldn't be a PvP option, because they specifically describe the islands as having a PvP option, when the Warfronts sounds like a larger scale version of those islands. And if the islands have a PvP option, why not this? It may be a couple of reasons. First of all, maybe they're still debating it. Second of all, maybe it's something that they do want to do, but not necessarily bring out at launch. They have been stung in the past by announcing things at BlizzCon that they have then not been able to deliver on. And then, you know, people are saying, well, because people take things they announce officially, and it doesn't come much more official than BlizzCon, as a promise, as a pact, as a covenant. Okay? So I think maybe they've just been a little bit careful on that. I would totally imagine that they must be planning a PvP option of this. They just maybe are working through all the details as yet. Ian Hazakostas at the start described this expansion as having started at pretty much the point at which Legion launched, which sounded strange to me because they went about all this idea about developing expansions in parallel. Legion and WoD were developed in parallel with two giant teams. So, well, once WoD was done with, what was that team doing? Presume maybe. So I don't know. That's really weird. But anyway. So what I'm trying to say is that they haven't really been spending much more than a year on this expansion so far, from the sounds of it. Now, it sounds like it might be quite advanced in some ways, and of course they may have done the preliminary thinking about systems before Legion came out. But yeah, so it might be one of those where they're not totally sure how it's going to work, so they don't want to talk about that. But there's definitely a PvE version. But then the other thing is, again, like it's not about AV, they're describing it as wanting to replicate the old Warcraft RTSs, but with you as a player in it, not like the overall God Commander type thing, controlling and seeing everything. So that would suggest, and not just suggest, because they pretty much said as much, didn't they? Because, yeah, AV was about getting resources and stuff together. Maybe you summon your big boss in the middle of it all. But ultimately, you weren't making buildings or anything like that. And this is that. You start off, they said, as Alliance building your town hall. First thing you do, just like in the Warcraft RTSs. If it didn't start you off with one already. Maybe we build farms. I doubt it. And then you choose which other buildings to make. Except instead of it being a straightforward vote, they described it as you put your resources into it. That's a recipe for disaster. But I'll talk about that more later. And then when you've built up your base and you've strengthened yourself, then you go out. I wonder if you go out and find a gold mine. But anyway, so it's what they're saying is they want it to replicate that RTS experience, but as an individual player within it, as opposed to controlling everything. So I don't think it will be quite like AV. It would be just most similar to old AV without actually being like it. Next one. So this was a bit of a lore one, a guess one. Because they said the Horde set fire to Teldrassil. Anduin found out that Sylvanas plans to attack Stormwind, which we know she's doing from the prologue that was leaked. So he needed to attack first. I say leaked. I keep saying leaked, and it wasn't leaked. It was actually just given to people. But for that, he needed a reason to do so because no one would have let him. I think there's two fallacies with this. He said, I don't know much about the law. I might be wrong. I'm just speculating. Everyone's speculating at this point. But there are two reasons why that wouldn't happen. First of all, Anduin is such a goody two-shoes. He would never do that. Like, you never do that. Like, you're thinking about what Arthas did to get his way. You know, burning his own ships and all the rest of it. And then blaming the mercenaries and having those killed. Anduin is completely different to that. He's, like, annoyingly virtuous. So there's no way he would do it. The other thing is this idea that other faction leaders wouldn't let him attack the Horde. Many of the other faction leaders are itching for that war. Greymane, definitely wants that war. Tyrande definitely does. She doesn't need Teldrassil setting fire to want to get in on that war either. She's definitely up for it as well. No one cares about the gnome. I'm not sure about the dwarves. Draenei, I don't know. But at least the Night Elves and the Worgen definitely up for a war against the Horde. And, you know, he's not just King of the Alliance, he's King of the Stormwind anyway. He could easily argue that many of the inhabitants of Stormwind, bear in mind, would have originally come from Lordaeron. They'd definitely be up for going there as well. So he wouldn't have to make much of a case to go to war with the Horde. But again, one of these things, he wants peace. He's like Jaina used to be. He wants peace with the Horde. So it's not, he wouldn't do it. I don't think he would want it. I think he'll be a reluctant king in the battle against the Horde here. So it won't, and it will be I'm pretty much sure. I can't remember the exact words they said. I'm pretty sure they did say that the Horde did it. They just tried to smooth over like who started it, who attacked who first, basically. But in no case. The next comment says, so the panels felt lacking in any real info. Do you feel this explanation is a lot farther off than we were hoping for or want? I feel like it's going to be late 2018, early 2019 release. No. I mean, we don't know when it's going to be released, of course. But I tried to warn about this before this BlizzCon. These BlizzCons are always devoid of details. Always. 2 years ago, when they were talking about Legion, again before the alpha went open, they, again, because they do all this all the time, they announce the features and they say they say how it's going to work, but what they're really doing is saying how they want it to work. And they're getting you all excited about it. But there aren't any details. There are no details at all in these BlizzCons. I didn't expect them to be. In fact, I think I actually said, I don't know whether I said this in the stream or a video beforehand, that I would expect more questions than answers at this BlizzCon. This is about whetting our appetite. And they don't whet our appetite by giving us all the answers, So we're going to have to get... And even when the time we'll get a lot of information is when they open up the alpha and people start playing it and reporting on it, as in opening the alpha. I mean, obviously it's already in alpha, but the open version without NDAs. And then we'll start to find out more. But even then, those people, because I was in fairly early on, I was in the second wave. So by the end of 2000 I have to get the date and time right. It's 2015. I was in the Legion Alpha right at the end. I think it was the new year, actually. Yeah. And there was virtually none of Legion in it. There was some zones you could go into. There was quests you could do. They weren't all there. They didn't even have all the specs. They didn't even have all the classes. Now, I would expect all the classes and specs to be here this time because they're not doing a major overhaul. But they are still going to have to do something, even though it's not a lot. So, yeah, don't read into the fact that they're not telling us very much. If there was any criticism I would give on it, it was simply that I don't think they did a very good job of hyping it, I have to say. But that's me personally. Next one. Now, this was a curious thing to say. It says, think about this. DKs can finally level as if they are starting in Wrath finally, instead of starting in Wrath, then going to TBC, then being allowed to continue. It's interesting you say that, because that was my thought for the opposite with this scaling thing. Because, yes, it always sounds really weird. It sounded... I mean, I was in the Wrath beta when I was doing this on my DK, and yeah, you did the starting stuff, and it was clearly all to do with the start of Wrath. It was post-TBC, very, very clearly. And you got out of there, you were level 57, 58. You had to do another little bit of questing, really, to get to 58 to go to Outland before you could start your quest there, because the quests there start at level 58 currently. And then, yeah, you're doing TBC stuff. And it's like, what the hell? And you have to level up another 10, 12 levels before you can go to Outland. Before you can go to Northrend, sorry. So, yes, that was odd. And this does sound like it should solve that problem. But it doesn't. Because you're still going to finish your DK leveling area before level 60. And they've described Northrend and Outland as scaling from 60 to 80. When you finish your DK starting quest, you are sort of either 57 or 58. It does depend on whether you're using heirloom gear or not. I think heirloom gear you can get to 58. But you certainly don't get to 60 unless you keep going off and getting rested bonus somehow. But if you just start a DK and level it and do those leveling quests, you're not level 60. So that suggests to me that although, okay, fair enough, you don't have to go to Outland, you're still having to potter around doing some quests to get yourself up to 60. I don't know why they didn't just make it scale from 58 to 60 or 57 to 60 even. But it will be an improvement. There's no argument about it. It will be an improvement, and it will make more sense to the DKs. Last one for this section. So it says, something seems wrong with the concept for the new expansion. This is a storyline based thing. The entire leveling experience of vanilla and the story it had, including the endgame raids, was specifically to get across the point that the Horde versus Alliance thing was a mistake, it was a distraction, a misunderstanding, a secret plot by forces who wished to remain unseen that wanted to threaten all of Azeroth. And the person went on to describe this in each expansion. And yes, this is true. It was not even true of World of Warcraft. This was true of Warcraft 3 even, with Medivh trying to get the Horde and the Alliance to behave themselves. But they keep doing this. They do this every time. You know, it was. Do you know what I thought quite funny? When I read the prologue to Before the Storm, the first comment I saw on Wowhead was, yes, called it, they're at war again. It's like, wasn't exactly the most difficult thing to call. You know, is this sort of person the sort of guy who goes, tomorrow morning the sun's going to rise, and then tomorrow morning dawn comes, called it, look. You know, it happens every time. We inevitably work together. The Horde and the Alliance inevitably work together for the raid content, especially, I mean, dungeon content as well, but especially the raid content, because that's the main storyline. That sort of follows the main storyline of the expansion. And of course, they're not going to do separate raids for Horde and Alliance. So you have the common enemy. So of course, and you're both doing it, you're both working together. Occasionally they've tried to deviate from it, like they had the gunship battle in Icecrown Citadel and stuff like that. You know, so occasionally they try and do that. But by and large, you sort of get the impression you are basically both on the same side. You know, it may well still be, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend type situation, as opposed to actually respecting each other. But nonetheless, you're working together. And then at the end of it, it all seems to me that Blizzard go, oh, it's World of Warcraft. Horde versus Alliance. We've got to have someone pick a fight again, so they're at each other's throats. And then they do that, and then they go into the next set of raids and stuff like that. So the start of Legion, of course, the way they had us at each other's throats again was by the Horde getting ambushed and having to retreat. The Alliance just seeing them retreat, and that started that all off again. You know, and then we've worked together again effectively in terms of defeating the Burning Legion. They use the Order Halls as the narrative for that one, with Horde and Alliance both working for the same sort of, you know, class factions, basically. And then at the end of it all, it's all kicking off again because Sylvanas decides she wants to attack the Alliance. They keep doing it. They keep doing it, and they keep doing it. And they'll do it again. They will do it again. This expansion sounds like it might be a little different in that there doesn't seem to be an overall storyline to it. There doesn't seem to be a main theme. There may be a main theme that emerges at them, because you can't really say that the theme is Horde versus Alliance, because the theme, whatever it is, the storyline, has to take in the raids. The raids have to be the culmination of that storyline. That's how it is. That's the main premier content. And the raids have to be common to both Alliance and Horde players. You can put in the odd fight like happened in Wrath again. What was that god-awful raid called before ICC came out? Where you had the faction enemies, like a mock PvP thing, but with NPCs. You can put that in, sure. But you're not going to have that for every boss. So, that's on for Battle for Azeroth. Questions that have come in so far. So, next one onto the classic servers. There are a few questions about this that it's worth talking about, because certainly it's true that a lot of people are very excited about this one. So, one question, or one statement, I should say, not questions really, they're statements. It says, I'm personally interested in this project, but I'll wait till they reveal the business model to consider committing to it. There's no commitment really, is there? You know, it's not like they're going to make us purchase it. At most, it would be a sub, and I don't think there should be a sub. It says, also, I think this may not be coming out that soon at all. No, I absolutely agree with that. The strong impression I got from the very little they said about it is this is not ready to go. They're just announcing it. Now, there's, again, because we don't know their motivation, they didn't describe the motivation, I can guess at their motivation. I think it is to break private servers. But, or at least to reduce them in number. But there's other possible motivations they have as well. And it depends on what the motivation is. I would be surprised at them announcing it when, at the moment, there's no great pressure for them to. Arguably, there was a year ago, but they didn't announce it last year. If they weren't planning on bringing it out in the next year, because the pressure on them has lessened. There's always a certain pressure, of course, because people who play on the private vanilla servers want this thing, and they will constantly be, saying to Blizzard that they do want this thing. But it's not as great as it was. So I would guess before the next BlizzCon, or at least that by the next BlizzCon it would be imminent. But yeah, I certainly don't think this is in the first half of next year. I think this is late 2018 at best. That's the impression I get as well. But of course we don't know. And it also says here, I don't think Blizz want to divert people from their main WoW team into this when they're working on BFA. They sort of used that as their argument before. Now, when I did a video when all the nostalgia thing was kicking off, I did several videos really. And there was one where Blizzard gave us their reason that they didn't want to distract their WoW team. And I said at the time, this is still what I would say at the time, you don't use any World of Warcraft developers on this project. You don't need to. It doesn't need any of the current WoW team. All you need is a relative... You know you only need a small team of people because these private servers are run by a small team of people, which don't even have the resources of Blizzard. So you just need a small team of people that can live in an office the size of this room. You don't know how big this room is, but it's, a medium-sized bedroom. You can do that. And you don't take them from the WoW team. You have a separate team for classic servers. A few people, a small number of people that can maintain a game that's already developed. Yes, all right, they're talking about, we've lost lots of things. How have you lost lots of things in this day and age? Behave yourself. But anyway, there's plenty of people willing to give them whatever they've got anyway that they use for the private servers. So they could easily make this happen without getting any current World of Warcraft developers to spend 5 minutes on it, let alone a significant proportion of their daily tasks. So I don't think there's any real argument against them doing this, really. Other than the fact it's one of these situations, you could sort of tell this again every time I've done a video on this. It includes the video I did on this weekend. There'll be an awful lot of people are going, yes, they're really hyped about it, but there's no detail yet. People have in their mind what they want from these classic servers, and people may differ on what they want from them. Now, it could be argued with private servers, you can pick the one that does it the way you want it, sort of. When it's Blizzard doing it, it's the official one, well, it will be just like this. They're not going to come up with different flavours of it, are they? They're going to do a version, launch a number of servers for it, and that's going to be the way it goes. Next one. So I was describing at the end of it the fact that for players who don't remember WoW, vanilla, or didn't play it at all, don't underestimate the lack of quality of life. And the term I use is pain in the arse moments. Person here saying those pain in the arse moments are what brought the community together, at least in my experience. Having to communicate with other human beings to put together a group for a dungeon, travelling to get there. Those are the moments that created friendship that still exists today. I would disagree with that quite strongly. Because, as someone noted in that reply, that's what happens today. That's not what created the communities. Communities did exist, but that's not what did it, because that still exists in the game to now. It's simple human behaviour. Think about it this way in terms of modern society, modern suburbia, okay? I hardly know my neighbours. I'm on nodding terms with the people either side of me. I don't know anyone else, really. People say hello when we pass them on the street. I don't ignore anyone. They don't ignore me. But don't really know them. Don't know their names. Okay? We're not involved. We're not a community. Okay? Because we're so detached from it these days. Apart from anything else, you're my community, really. And at work, I've got a community as well, people I work closely with. But I'm not involved and divested with people around here. That's just the way it is. But that's not just modern life. That's just the nature of suburbia. There are communities that are quite close to each other, where people do know each other. And look at what those communities are like in real life. They tend to be smaller communities, usually quite isolated. Okay? The same sort of thing with vanilla. Why do I think that there was a community together? Because when you rolled a character and you leveled a character on a realm, that's where you were. You were on that realm. You couldn't change your name. You couldn't change server. That came, I think, Did that come at the end of vanilla? I think that may have come at the end of vanilla, but that wasn't around for the bulk of it. You know, you were there. You know, if you wanted to go to another server, you were rolling another character on the other server. So you were there. You would get to know people. I mean, in theory, you could see people in pugs that you form now, but, you know, you're not necessarily that involved in, because the chances of you coming across that same person again for another run in the next few months is next to zero. Pretty high chance in vanilla. You would come across the same people quite a lot of the time. Eventually, you would after a few times, you'd probably recognise them, and again, you'd strike up conversations, things like that. But to suggest that because of the difficulty of getting dungeon groups together and getting there and all the rest of it, that you had to invest in being polite to people, that's not my experience. Shall we put it that way? There were just as many rude and selfish people back in vanilla that would, you know, you'd spend an hour getting your group together, you'd get to the instance, and then someone say, sorry, I haven't got time for this, I've got to go. Knowing full well that a dungeon can easily take an hour to get together, and then you've got to do the dungeon itself, which takes a certain amount of time. They would just piss off. Sometimes people would get shirty in the dungeon itself and just go. And then what are you? You've got to then try and find a fifth person. Well, that means getting someone to go back to Ironforge. Whoa. So, no. Again, it's an opinion. It's all subjective. But in my opinion, the only thing that was different then to now, and the same may well apply on classic servers if they bring them back. And I'm sure the same is true on private servers, because again, you know, if you want to move to a different private server, again, you're creating a new character, aren't you? You can't just transfer it. Is that the fact that you cannot just transfer it? You know, your character, once you've invested a certain amount of time in it, to the point where you don't just want to make another one, you're stuck there. So it's in your interest to get on with people. And that is quite a nice feature. That is quite nice. Just not the way it works these days, is it? Next one, it says, I think you're wrong about Blizz making vanilla servers free. As a former... I'm not saying I think they will, by the way. I just think they should. I think there's a decent chance that they will. It says, as a former private server player and one who played in Endgame Guild, I can tell you that the main reason for people playing private servers isn't money, it's the actual expansion. Now, I'm going to stop you there. Because that may well be true for you, and it may well be true of your friends. But if it were true for everyone that's playing on those private servers, I would ask you this question, and that is, during vanilla, when it was vanilla, it was actually vanilla, why were there a lot of private servers? And there were a lot. There were a lot. The only reason for playing on a private server during vanilla was to play free. When you were subject to the same tomfoolery by the people who owned that server as you are now, by the way, you know, the sword of Damocles was always hanging over those people. They still did it because it was free. So you're not going to tell me that there are a significant number of people who are playing private servers because it's free. Okay? Yes, I understand that there's a significant number of people playing on them because that's the actual game they want. But there are also some that are playing it because, you know, it's a free experience. As there always were. As there always were. Next one, last proper one actually. It says, I won't get a back and forth with this, but I can't wait for people to realise those nostalgia glasses are blinding them. So someone again, sort of the view, and this will apply to some people, those people who didn't experience vanilla, and when the legacy servers come out, will give it a go and just think, oh my god, no. What we have to understand is there are actually a lot of people, a great many people, who genuinely want that experience because they're playing it right now. They're doing it on private servers. The fact that they're willing to put up with all the crap that comes on playing with a private server, which people have already pointed out, it's perfectly true. They won't have. This is why the people want Blizzard to do it, because you think about it this way: why are the people playing on those private servers desperate for Blizzard to bring them out? Why aren't they just happy playing the private servers? Because those private servers are often run by people who could easily be, well, a lot of them are quite unscrupulous, or it can close down at any time. Then you've lost the character. You know, remember a lot of people. Reason why people, you know, play WoW and wouldn't like to spend a lot of time on another game or something like that is because you've invested so much in your character already. You want to sort of keep it. Well, those people are the same, and that's not always possible. So, yeah, there are people who have been playing on these servers for several years and still love it and they enjoy that mode of game. It's a little bit like me with Doctor Who, say. So I was a huge Doctor Who fan, well, I still am really, when I was growing up. And there's different Doctor Who's, of course, because you had the original series, which ran from 1963 to like 1989, and then they brought it back much more recently, although still quite a fair while ago now. And the new ones, I never, I used to watch them. I still watch most of them, although I haven't watched any for a couple of years, really. Not as good. It's one of those things where I've sort of watched them, and some of them I thought are quite good. I haven't really been keen to watch them twice. Whereas the original series, which I grew up with, and it includes ones from before I was even born, so they're some of my favourite. I'll watch those on video and then nowadays on DVD over and over and over and over again. Sometimes when I had a new video of one I'd never seen before, only read about, I watched it all weekend. And it's the same sort of thing. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's rubbish, even though the special effects were much poorer and all the rest of it. Some people just like it for some other reason, and we have to accept that. Final one here. Oh, 3, local defence. The crossroads is under attack. Oh, I'm alive, so I don't care. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share. And until next time, I'll see you later.